Every single season, there are a few players that come in and turn into complete league winners that are unfair advantages. In this video, I will outline every single one of those players so you guys can come into this stretch of the season with an absolute insane roster. So we'll start with the priority list. Check your waivers as we go through them because they are your number one option if they're there. Starting with Theo Johnson, rostered at 35%. First things first, Jameis Winston is starting this week for the Giants, so that makes him and Wan'Dale Robinson great starts and stashes because Jameis Winston is going to pass 40 times in this matchup, making them near impossible to get off the waiver wire. Wan'Dale Robinson obviously already rostered in a ton of leagues. He's not on this video. But when we have Jackson Dart in for the rest of the season, we look at Theo Johnson. He's been averaging 6 targets per game in Dart's healthy starts this year, which is a very positive sign. He is a top target earner. We also do like the man, the myth, the legend, Alec Pierce, who's rostered in about 50% of leagues right now, but since they traded A.D. Mitchell, has become an integral top part of this offense for the Colts that is rolling right now. That is the type of ad that will make your league mates look at you and be upset because they want to be the manager that keeps winning and winning and winning and winning. Consider hitting that subscribe button if you want to continue to win on this channel. I do that, outline everything for you, and hit the like button if you are feeling generous and want to dominate, just like Tajay Spears, who is dominating as a stash for us this week. 9 fantasy football points in his last healthy starts as this season goes on. He is really just one of those guys where if Tony Pollard does get injured, could win leagues because of the receiving usage he does get. Kayshon Boutte also on this list, rostered in 41% of leagues. That is way too low. He is the wide receiver 1 on an offense that has 8, 9, probably going to be 10, maybe even 11 wins this season. Joe Flacco, a top 5 quarterback this week, getting one against the Steelers, rostered in 51% of leagues, but still, if he's there, you need him this week and the rest of the year. Brian Robinson also is taking a considerable amount of rushing usage from Christian McCaffrey. He's rostered in 32% of leagues. He is an elite handcuff for the rest of the season. But speaking of elite, Michael Wilson is going to be the most recent, most urgent stash of this week because Marvin Harrison Jr. is ruled out with appendicitis for week 11 versus the 49ers. There's a very high chance this turns into a multi-week injury where he's probably going to be out week 12 as well. There is no timeline, but it's not really considered an IR type of injury, so it won't be too long. But it does put Michael Wilson as your number 1 option and number 1 wide receiver in this offense, in a matchup against the 49ers that has been very positive to wide receivers so far this month, but also this year as a total. So you don't have Marvin Harrison, you don't have Zay Jones either, and now we don't have Kyler Murray. So the passing attempts are going to be a lot higher with Jacoby Brissett, and they're all going to Michael Wilson and Trey McBride, who is technically the wide receiver 1. But the reason everybody is overlooking Michael Wilson here is because of his route totals and his fantasy points. Those two things do not make sense and mix together. You see, he's not a part of the top 20, top 30, top 40 really wide receivers so far this year, but he's the wide receiver 15 in routes run per game at 31. That's higher than guys like CeeDee Lamb, Devontae Adams, Nico Collins on a per game basis. So now that Marvin Zay Jones aren't in this offense, he's going to skyrocket in targets and looks with Jacoby Brissett, who is a honestly better quarterback for his fantasy receivers. And without Marvin Harrison, who's been averaging 9.3 targets per game in Jacoby Brissett starts, that vacates a ton of targets that will go to Michael Wilson. Again, Trey McBride will stay as the wide receiver 1 for this year, but still, the amount of fantasy points that the 49ers are allowing to this matchup, you should pick him up before it is too late and he becomes an impossible waiver ad. But Blake Corum has quietly become a top stash in this video, and something that you might not expect that people overlook is the pure volume that he's getting. I mean, you look at the last 3 weeks, it is insane. In week 7, he had 12 carries to Kyron's 12, which was a split even rush share, then 13 to Kyron's 25 in week 10, and then 13 to Kyron's 14 last week versus the 49ers. I mean, this is real. What he's seeing and what he's doing is real, and this is exactly why we were selling Kyron Williams a few weeks ago before this got scary. But the scariest part is that Blake Corum is actually very efficient on his touches this year, 4.6 yards per carry. That's top 25 in the NFL. He's the RB12 in juke rate at 31%. That's ahead of Kyron Williams, and he's actually starting to run routes as well. On top of him averaging 13 carries per game, this is probably the best part on where he can get his season-long value and something that he can keep, because Kyron Williams is going to be the goal line running back. You're never going to take that away from him. But Kyron hasn't really been a great pass catcher for his career so far this year. It's just not what he's known for. And you look at the routes on a per snap basis, 18 routes on 40 snaps for Kyron last week. Blake Corum had 7 routes on his 26 snaps. And it's an even more positive sign that he's seeing all of this after the Rams went through their week 8 bye. We know after the bye weeks, teams get their offense and their team just in general more streamlined with what they want for the rest of the season. This is very, very good to see for him. He should be a mustache and a league winner, elite handcuff if Kyron Williams were to ever miss time. That's the kind of guy you want on your roster. But Luther Burden is also a guy that you want on your roster and becomes a top stash another week with his highest route participation of the year last week versus the Giants, along with his highest snap share at almost 50%. But there are a few things that people aren't understanding that are making him an even stronger ad. If you were to trust anybody giving you NFL insight, who would that guy be for you? Me most of the time, but outside of that, it's going to be all of the coaches. And you look at Ben Johnson, he said himself after their Week 10 game where they gave him more snaps in, remember that, there is a strong argument to get him the ball more. This is a direct quote on top of a bunch of praise that he's already been giving him. I mean, he said that he deserves more targets. They trust him a lot more. Caleb Williams and him are starting to grow in their relationship. And you look at the stats, it's just waiting to be a breakout. He's very efficient. He's the wide receiver 4 in yards per target so far this year. That's over guys like JSN, CeeDee Lamb, Puka Nacua, Jamar Chase. I could keep going. There's not many guys inside that top 4. But with DJ Moore getting a minor injury like every single week, and then last week Olamide Zaccheaus dropping 2 of his total 4 targets, maybe this is the turning point where he actually does start to get an increase in snaps and then becomes a great value for us fantasy managers that do pick him up. And then we go through and get Tyler Lockett also in this video. Yes, old man Tyler Lockett. He reunites with Geno Smith and Pete Carroll from his prime Seahawks days. And just like the middle school basketball team that I didn't make, coaches have favorites sometimes. And that is a guy that Tyler Lockett is, a coach's favorite for Pete Carroll. In his second game with this team, he played 57% of the snaps, which led him to be the highest targeted wide receiver on the team with 6, catching 5 of them for 44 yards and almost 10 fantasy points. And the real reason that he is a great stash is because he gets a top 5 matchup. He is a more urgent guy because he gets the Cowboys this week, who are 3rd in fantasy football points allowed to wide receivers this year. They are 2nd in points allowed to opposing team totals at 30.8 per game, and they're allowing almost 400 yards to opposing offenses. That's also top 2. That is going to be super important for a Geno Smith-led offense that doesn't have the best quarterback play. So in this matchup, insanely positive, where Tyler Lockett's snaps should increase by a huge amount. As a slot wide receiver that is filling in 1-for-1 with that Jacoby Myers role, he will crush. He has a very safe floor on top of that with being a slot wide receiver. They typically see a higher snap and target share because of that. He is going to be impossible to add off the waiver wire if he does have a good game this week. He's coming into the matchup with a knee injury though. If he is restricted, if he doesn't play, it's not going to be as urgent. And if you're starting him, just be aware of that. He could see a lower snap share because of that. But he's a guy I'm willing to wait and see on and stash for the rest of the year. Just like A.D. Mitchell, who might be a little bit more of a developmental ad. But in an alternate universe, this guy would be a top wide receiver because he is so talented. And I think we got to see a little glimpse of that last week, the other day, versus the New England Patriots. He just doesn't connect on the small things. He drops some passes. He loses focus during routes a little bit, which sometimes that can't really be taught, but I'm willing to take the risk on it for this year if you're in a bit of a deeper league. He finished with only 2 fantasy points, catching 1 of his total 6 targets. Now, a lot of them were uncatchable. A lot of them were drops as well. But if he had a good quarterback that was not Justin Fields, I promise you that game he would have had over 15 fantasy points, and he is a stash almost entirely dependent on the quarterback. If we do have Justin Fields sitting at some point, which I think is a very, very high chance to happen, he's going to be on the cusp of a league winner guy that is just no value right now, but can be started at some point. Fields just doesn't have the passive volume to make any wide receiver viable in fantasy football with all seriousness. Those 6 targets, it was a 23% target share. That's honestly pretty good if it was on any other pass-heavy team, but he just doesn't pass enough. So we look at A.D. Mitchell, there's clearly going to be a role for him. He is their downfield guy. He is very talented. With Garrett Wilson out with a knee injury for 3 to 4 weeks, he's expected to come back sometime this season. But when you look at the season and when you look at the year, there's no reason that Garrett Wilson should rush back to this offense and play again. So with that, A.D. Mitchell could be the locked and loaded wide receiver 1 for more than we expect, more time than we expect. And he only played 50% of snaps last week. It was his first game with the team after being traded from the Jets. There's still a lot of opportunity for him. Maybe he's not the most urgent ad of this week, but he has another good matchup against the Ravens next week in week 12. So if Tyrod Taylor starts there, or if he ever does end up starting, AD Mitchell is going to be a lot more urgent of an ad, so keep that in your back pocket. Some other guys that I also want to call out rapid fire we should be stashing is Cedric Tillman. He is another guy that is a top slot wide receiver. He's just at the mercy and the pity of his offense. Dylan Gabriel's not that good of a quarterback. He'll pass the ball at a decent amount, but the question of if they will be valuable targets and if they will be accurate targets, that's something else. We do have Jerry Jeudy in this offense. We do have Njoku. And we do have Harold Fanning getting a decent amount of looks as well. But they have one of the most positive rest of season schedules for wide receivers, at least. It should be something where we can go through again and get a slot wide receiver that runs shorter routes, have a lower average depth of target, and it allows them to be targeted more. Again, when your offensive line sucks, your wide receivers can't develop their routes downfield, which means you have to go to the dump offs, which is the Quinshon Judkins, the tight ends, and Cedric Tillman. So stash him and Isaiah Likely, who's been in this video for the longest time. I wasn't going to go in depth with him because I feel like I've talked about him every single week. He had a little bit of an injury. He came back. He's playing now with Lamar Jackson. This team is in win now mode. He does have one of the most positive rest of season schedules for tight ends as well. It's very, very positive for him. And here's some other guys on screen just in case you want to get a little bit deeper. But that's going to finish out this video. Thank you guys so much for hopping in this one and all of the videos so far this week. I will be dropping the defensive rankings tomorrow. Make sure to have your post notifications and everything you want on for that. I will see you there. All glory to the man above.